Max, we are navigating uncharted territory as the NBA suspends the season until further notice after a player tested positive for coronavirus. Our Adrian Wojnarowski identified the player as Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert, who tested positive Wednesday for the virus. The NBA announcing that a player on the Utah Jazz has preliminarily tested positive for COVID-19. The test result was reported shortly prior to the tip-off of tonight's game between the Jazz and Oklahoma City Thunder at Chesapeake Energy Arena. At that time, tonight's game was canceled. The affected player was not in the arena. The NBA is suspending gameplay following the conclusion of tonight's scheduled games until further notice. The NBA will use this hiatus to determine next steps for moving forward in regard to the coronavirus pandemic. Players the Jazz have faced within the past 10 days, including the teams you are seeing listed here, are being told to self-quarantine, a source telling our Brian Windhorst, who will be with us momentarily. And now we welcome in Mike Greenberg. And good morning, Stephen A. Max, I'm Molly Karen Rose. Wow. This has been a crazy couple days. And obviously, Stephen A., not just the fact that games have been suspended. The NBA has suspended the season, but the fact that it has been deemed a pandemic. What was your reaction to the news as this came down last night?
Well, because the World Health Organization came out and it labeled it and deemed it a pandemic, I knew, and I was far from shocked or surprised when I learned that the season would be suspended. The second you heard that Rudy Gobert had tested positive, and a dear friend of mine had called me last night because I was driving. I was en route to Long Island after I had hosted, the Sports Center show. And she called me to tell me, look, they just stopped the game. He said the game's not even starting. They're saying that Rudy Gobert and several other players may have been ill, and then it was announced that Rudy Gobert had the coronavirus. And the second that happened, I knew that within the hour, the season would be suspended. Because if you're the National Basketball Association, what is your nightmare? That a player has contracted the virus and he has been around other players and obviously players being around their family and what have you. And this is what the deal is. I mean, ultimately, it's going to spread. And so you had to neutralize that to the best of your ability as immediately as you possibly could. I love the fact that they used the word suspended as opposed to cancel, because that gives you hope that ultimately the games will resume. That means folks are confident that they're working on, obviously, finding a cure and obviously addressing the situation with the expediency that it deserves. And we'll see what happens in that regard. But ultimately, I'm not surprised at all. It was the right move by the NBA to act as swiftly as they possibly could. Utah was held in OKC at the arena for about 5 hours, if I remember correctly, before they were granted a hotel in OKC or what have you. I think that everything that could have been done in the moment has been done. They'll continue to put forth their due diligence, but I don't think anyone can argue with the decision that was made. The only thing that I'll say that jumped out at me is that I don't want anybody to attach malice intent on a part of Rudy Gobert, who was playing around, touching the microphones and tape recorders and all that stuff. But it was still, he needs to understand it was incredibly irresponsible for him to play around like that to begin with. And that video is going to be shown all over the world over the next couple of days or so, him touching microphones and tape recorders of the media, playing around and stuff like that. He didn't take it seriously. I assure you, everybody's taking it seriously.
There's been a lot of that in this country, as a matter of fact. Forget about Gobert for a second, who did it, and it was stupid. People who were at first saying it was a hoax as a result of some very bad and disingenuous media coverage early on and making it a point to shake hands with other people to show how unconcerned they were. Gobert and everyone else, and even people who wear masks, that's really not about not getting it yourself so much as it's about not spreading it. It's you don't want to overtax the healthcare system. That's when things get dangerous. My reaction when I heard the news from the NBA was, of course, Adam Silver is out in front of it, just as he was when Donald Sterling made those despicable remarks. He got rid of him, just as he was when China tried to dictate speech policy to the NBA. He stood up. And I'm not claiming that's the first thing he did, right? Because, of course, every business tries to protect its bottom line. So the first thing you do is not cancel everything and give back all the money. It's the last thing you want to do. So there were intermediate steps, even in the China situation, where there was a little hesitation, how are we going to handle this? But then he came down on the right side, and he's done it again. Rather than wait, and Wendy, you brought it up yesterday when I said they're going to be playing in front of empty arenas. You said as soon as one person tests positive, they have to suspend play, which is exactly what happened because of the contagion, because you have to quarantine them. And Adam Silver is out in front of it. Mark Emmert and others are lagging behind. And this is instructive because there are powerful economic or financial incentives, to look out only for your short-term interest. And in our world, that means this news cycle, but Adam Silver had the foresight to do the right thing, and the NBA is leading the way as usual.
Well, usually I love coming in here because I get to give my strong opinion on things, but today I will cede my opinion to our mutual friend Charles Barkley, who was on Get Up with us in our first hour today and went off. I mean off. And remember, bear in mind, he is in the studio, Steve, as you well know, for CBS and Turner as they do the NCAA tournament. And he said in no uncertain terms that those games should not be played. But I will point out that as of now, and John Swofford, the commissioner of the ACC, was on ACC Network this morning and said the games will be played today. They'll be played in front of mostly empty arenas. I believe they're in Charlotte. They will be played. Each team gets 150 tickets, so there'll be very limited people in the stands, but those games will be played. The Players' Championship, golf, they're playing right now. Spectators are there. They're on the course as we speak in Ponte Vedra, Florida. Baseball spring training games are being played today in front of fans in both Florida and Arizona. So the NBA has made this move, but they are, at this point, the only league in this country that has completely suspended what they're doing.
Yesterday, we were talking about the Ivy League. The Ivy League, as is usually the case, was smarter than everybody else. They shut down. And I want to commend the APT Tour because they shut down Indian Wells and they shut down their league going forward. They were ahead of this. And that's why I'm stunned the PGA Tour, which is comparable to the ATP Tour in terms of their universal and international field. I mean, we've been showing this video of Phil Mickelson practicing on the range this morning. His caddy sneezes right in front of it. And it's not that I think the caddy has coronavirus. It's that you're bringing all these people together. So I would encourage, number one, leadership from the people who are in sports. I thought Mark Cuban showed incredible leadership last night when this chaos was going on, standing in front of the cameras and making a statement on behalf of the NBA about what was going to happen and what was going to be done. He then came on Get Up this morning and showed more leadership. I appreciate the NBA, who I thought was a little bit sluggish in not immediately banning all fans from the arenas. We saw individual teams make very strange statements. The Cavs saying that their air handlers at their arena could clear out the air. We saw the Wizards defy the D.C. mayor's order. We saw the conference call come and go and no issue. But they did have testing measures in place so that Gobert could get tested. And as soon as he was able to get the result, they were able to pull the plug. I encourage everybody else who is in a position of leadership in sports to show the leadership and do the correct thing, which is to be on the right side of history and suspend things that are going on, and we will come back and finish it later.
Which is why we should have an extremely huge problem with the ACC still having their tournament and with the NCAA overall, who hasn't canceled anything. I can't explain enough. I almost shake when I think about the NCAA and their exploitive tendencies that we have lamented for decades. And here you are with institutions of higher learning closing their schools, but somehow, some way, you still won't stop your basketball tournament from taking place. The ACC, you talk about just 150 people, or whatever the case may be. Here's the reality of the situation. Max and I have talked about this over the air on several occasions over the last few days. They talk about, 10 days to 2 weeks before you even know, before you even have any symptoms.
Between 5 and 14 days where you don't show symptoms.
Yeah. That's right, between 5 and 14 days. So again, if you don't show symptoms, how would you know? And then you're talking about the players and you're talking about the 150 people in attendance. When they leave the arena, who the hell are they communicating with? You don't know this. The fact that we're still learning so much, I don't care if you allow 10 people in the arena. You should do everything you can to refrain from that level of participation. And oh, by the way, the athletes themselves, if we got to worry about shaking hands with folks or people sneezing in our vicinity, what about the athletes who are breaking a sweat, competing against one another, banging bodies, swapping sweat, for crying out loud, and all of this other stuff? What about that? How do you not take that into consideration when it comes to athletics?
Just in terms of a numbers
It's
game,
inexcusable.
we have players from all over the country, the personnel.
Congressional doctor yesterday, I believe it was, predicted that between 70 and 150 million Americans are going to get the coronavirus. In other words, almost, more than half the country is going to have it. The issue is not whether or not people will get it. It's an infectious disease. It's asymptomatic early on. It spreads very easily. The issue is the point of social distancing is to slow the spread,
right,
so that everyone doesn't get it all at once. That's when the most vulnerable are even more vulnerable. That's why, if people say, well, if everyone's going to get it anyway, that's why you don't convene 20,000 people in the same place at the same time. Why lower numbers are better. Why I originally thought maybe they can do it in an empty gym. Because with training staff and everything, 50 people get together, it's okay. But once one person has it, as you pointed out yesterday, Wendy, then you have to quarantine them, their family, everyone they've come in contact with. It doesn't work.
The NCAA takes a lot of criticism. Obviously, we all know this, and I'll bring this up to you, both Greeny and Wendy. Don't you think this is an opportunity for them to get in front of a situation like this and show that they actually care about the players' well-being when you can't attend class, but you can play in a game?
I will be very surprised if those games are played as scheduled next week. I'm surprised that and again, the NCAA does not determine what the conferences individually do or the member schools individually do up until the tournament itself starts, which for both the men and the women is next week. I personally will be shocked if next Thursday morning, which is traditionally one of the great sports days in the country, actually it's Tuesday because the first 4 games would be in Dayton. I will be shocked if those games are played as scheduled.
Let me tell you why they're not going to be played. Because regardless of what Charles Barkley said, or what Stephen A. has said, what Jay Billis, influential people, at some point today, the lawyers are going to get in the ear of Mark Emmert. And there is a potential liability here. And that, at the end of the day, might be what causes a tipping point. Because there's certainly going to be cases in the situation. And it's not just about, like Max says, bringing 50 people together. It's bringing 8 different schools together, playing in the same locker rooms in the same gym, and then sending them out back to 8 different places.
But the thing about it is that doesn't negate the fact that the NCAA already dropped the ball.
Yeah.
That's baffling.
You already dropped the ball because you had an opportunity. Your opportunity to get out in front of it, Molly, has passed because the NBA has already acted along with a multitude of others. And you, with the student athlete, you talk about professional sports and professional athletes who get paid millions, and the league is losing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars potentially, and they still stopped play. But you, who lives off of March Madness, but the athletes don't get paid, you still announce that you're going to make sure to send them out there. That, to me, is what shows what the NCAA is all about. You've already dropped the ball.
The state is already there, regardless of how they handle it now moving forward and trying to correct it.
I try to think of, look at Adam Silver. That's real leadership, and you mentioned leadership. And Charles Barkley coming out and saying stuff now, it's clearly true that everything should be put on hold. But you start to wonder, what is the motivation for those who are not showing leadership, where you can see inevitably where it's going? You have to be not that smart not to see it. And ostensibly, people rise to positions of power because they have some sort of sense of what's going on. And I understand the idea, don't panic. I get that. But at the same time, given the facts of the situation, I just wonder what someone like Mark Emmert is thinking, really, when presented the information, knowing, well, this is where this is heading.
Maybe for someone to test positive.
Can I throw this out to y'all as well? This is what makes it look even worse. He was helped by the NBA. Here's why. If the NBA, why do you want to get over March Madness? Because the NBA playoffs begin the very next month in April and they go into June. Well, by them suspending their season and therefore pushing their season back, it now gives you the latitude to push your season back and delay it. You could have restarted it when the NBA restarted it, and you would have been fine. Basketball,
also, the NBA draft process is getting pushed back.
Everything.
The players.
You had a clear path to make the right decision, and still you didn't do it. That's the NCAA.
There's another terrible optic that they have here, and I know this because I'm the parent of a college student. They're sending my daughter home. They call it distance learning. So they will be learning, and they'll be in their own homes. I mean, literally, almost every university at some point soon is going to send the kids home who can go home. And we're talking about from one end of the country to the other, from Stanford all the way to Harvard and everywhere in between, including Northwestern, where my daughter is. So the players at this moment are scheduled to play basketball on a court with each other, which is an extraordinarily physical activity. But the students are not safe to be living in dorms and living amongst each other and going to class. The optics of that are also, of course, horrendous.
One of the things, and I mentioned this on the show, maybe, I don't remember when, several days ago, where there was a Harvard professor who tweeted out, you know, in a few weeks, there's not going to be anyone in a classroom, right? So once you know that, you can imagine how this unfolds. The real issue on college campuses are kids who don't have any place to go to the campus.
Yes.
Like in this time, everyone needs to look out for the most vulnerable among us, right? Those are the real people. But getting back to Emmert and your point about him, Stephen A. Here you have an opportunity. The reputation of the NCAA is it's exploitative, that everyone profits except the student athlete, that they're only in it for the money. And here you have an opportunity, and it's not even a difficult one to do, because you see where it's headed, to get out in front. But instead, the optics are that you are craven and only interested in the cash.
I think and I'll ask you this one, if the NCAA came out and said, we're going to test all the players before they play, so we're sure everybody's healthy, but we don't even have the capability to do that.
The time for that has passed. Every crisis begets opportunity.
Yes.
We know that from living life as long as we live life.
That's right.
There's opportunity for leadership here. I saw Mark Cuban. My esteem for Mark Cuban has increased dramatically by what he did last night. Not only did he, by the way, go in front of everybody and calm everybody down, but he also said he wants to take care of the arena workers. He came on Greeny's show this morning and said, right now I'm telling you we're going to pay them for the next 4 games, and then we're going to work on a plan from there. Completely taking leadership. There is opportunity, as you said, Max, for leadership all across the spectrum. But let's just talk about the sports world. There's opportunity here, or a lot of different things. There are silver linings that are going to come from this. I realize that today we're not going to see that. But there are opportunities to take advantage of this. And the people who do will end up being remembered for being on the right side of history. I cannot emphasize this enough. As you sit there today in your offices, do not be on the wrong side of history here. We are in a historic time. These are historic days. That's the last thing you want to be. And I'm a little bit worried about what I'm seeing in some of these areas.
You should be worried. You should be worried, because when it comes to the NCAA, for example, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they've just already shown a flagrant disrespect for their number one asset, the athlete, the student athlete. That's what ultimately delivers you. That what buffers your coffers. For them to sit up there and to conduct themselves this way, it's disgraceful as far as I'm concerned, and they need to be called out for it. On a day like today, we're not trying to call anybody out. We're trying to elevate the level of attention that needs to be brought to this situation. And instead, they've assisted in attempting to compromise us from doing just that by making the decision that they made.
To show you that, like, you know, it's not, I don't think we're talking about Emmert and a decision we don't agree with. And a lot of times I'm on Jim Dolan on this show, and I'm going to say something about that now. But I'm only saying it really to show that what Adam Silver did, not everyone does. In fact, only he has done it so far, and he deserves enormous praise as we criticize others. But Woj tweeted an hour after tweeting about, or before tweeting about the end of the season, several teams were willing to put the games on hiatus, but the rest waited to move toward eliminating fans from arenas to continue playing games, sources tell ESPN. One team wanted to keep status quo until a governmental public mandate dictated change, the New York Knicks. I mean, we have examples right now of the way to do it, Adam Silver, and the way not to do it. So as you have implored people, follow the leaders like Adam Silver.
You mentioned both Mark Cuban and Charles Barkley, who are with you this morning on Get Up. We'll hear from them after the break.
Yeah, I don't agree with Charles Barkley in terms of cancellation. Suspension, yes. Postponement, yes. But to just flat out say cancel, I don't agree with Charles Barkley.
We'll be touching on that after the commercial break. Greeny, thank you for being with us. We'll have much more on this on Get Up tomorrow, 8 to 10 a.m. Obviously, Greeny and Laura every morning.
Thank you.
He's there for you, setting the table on sports. Wendy, you'll be sticking around here with us? Okay. Much more on the coronavirus crisis and the impact on the NBA specifically and the sports world. We'll be back after this short break. Stay here.